Welcome to the 5am podcast, where we bring you insightful conversations with thought leaders and influencers who are making headway and some waves in their industries. Today, we are thrilled to have with us a remarkable author whose journey is as captivating as her novels. She was born in Athens, Greece, and as an Air Force brat, Teri's life has been an adventure right from the start. She's now calling the beautiful North Carolina coast home. She's found inspiration in the peaceful nature of the sea. And Teri's not just an author, she's a wife, mother, grandmother, podcaster, and a woman who's redefined her own limits. Her novels include Sunflowers Beneath the Snow, An Enemy Like Me, and Daughters of Green Mountain Gap. These books have touched readers' hearts, while her upcoming book, 10 Rules for a Double-Butted Adventure, promises to inspire us all. Let's dive into Teri's world of words, wisdom, and unexpected journeys. Teri, welcome to the FEM podcast. We are glad to have you here.
I am so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. Well, we met on a website called Podmatch, and you were actually the first person to reach out to me and book this interview. So that was just 2 weeks ago. Now my calendar is full between Podmatch and publicists that I work with. It is a delight to have you here. And the first thing that caught my attention about your email was a tandem bike ride across America. How did you get the idea to ride a tandem bicycle across America?
So I'm going to have to go back just a short distance.
Do it.
My husband and I were dating. I had gotten out of a really horrible relationship. It was 14 years of emotional abuse.
Wow.
And when I kind of got out of that relationship, I was never going to date again, never going to get married again. But nonetheless, Bruce found me and we started dating, and he is an avid cyclist. He's been wanting to ride across the United States since 1976. A group of college kids did it.
Wow.
And he was in the military, though, and it wasn't like he could take 3 months off and go join them. So this has been in the back of his mind forever. On the other hand, I've gotten out of this bad relationship, and I have been wanting to do something big and bold and adventurous. And I thought I needed to prove to people that I don't know, I still had something in me, right?
Right.
And I thought maybe walking the Appalachian Trail or doing something that just was like way outside my wheelhouse.
Yes.
Well, he brought up he wanted to ride across the United States on a bicycle. And I thought, that's adventurous. So the more we talked, we realized that we wouldn't be very compatible if we were riding separate bikes because he's so much better than I am. And that wouldn't be fun for me. I would always be, 10 miles behind and so we decided that we would do it on a tandem.
Wow. That is really cool. So what was the process of preparation, even just in finding the right tandem bicycle? But talk about the preparation for this.
So, I went through 7 saddles before I found one that I thought that I could ride across the United States.
Get that. Yes.
I think men have it a little easier. He seemed to have no problem. I think he could have sat on a tin can and he would have been fine. I would get on it and it wouldn't feel right, and it would cause me to have pains that would run down my legs. And so there was that. There was just getting used to one another's cadence, because when you're riding a tandem, you have to be synced.
Yes.
The two of you. Now your pedals are synced together.
Yeah.
But if one is pedaling faster than the other feels comfortable or harder or whatever, you have to find where does that fit for both of you.
Yeah.
And then we live on the coast of North Carolina, and it's flat. And so we did a lot of miles.
Gotcha.
We probably rode 1,000 miles, but there weren't very many hills in that.
Right. Yeah, that's a game changer.
It is a game changer.
Sorry.
And on the very first day in Oregon, what's the first thing we do? We cross over a mountain range.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Wow. So what was your route?
So there is an organization, and it's called, Adventurous Cycling.
Yes.
And Adventurous Cycling has maps for all over the United States as to where you could travel. And Like, can you find a place to stay or eat or that kind of thing? So we had looked over those maps and we started out on what they called their Lewis and Clark journey.
Yep.
And that took us kind of through Oregon, up into Washington State a little bit.
Yes.
Then into Idaho and up over the Lolo Pass, which is where we crossed the Rocky Mountains.
Wow.
Down into Missoula, Montana. And then from there, we went north and pretty much stayed on Route 2 the whole way across the United States into upper Michigan.
Awesome.
And then we kind of made our way down into Washington that way.
That's cool. That's cool. My wife and I used to live in the Pacific Northwest. And so I had looked at that area, and Highway 2 is a way we used to take to get to my grandparents.
Yeah.
At another point in my life. But that being able to, I was going to ask you about conquering the hills, but before that, this tandem bike idea that you two came up with, it's like a metaphor for a relationship. And I don't know how emotional you want to get in this conversation, but I'm going to ask you, going from let's say the tragedy and despair and pain of the previous relationship to now all of a sudden you meet this man who wants you to do something unbelievable. Not only that, he's willing to change his cadence of pedaling to meet yours. Can you talk about that?
So Bruce is an amazing man, and it's a gift to have had him in my life. I'm going to tell you something you may not be aware of. He passed away a month ago.
Wow.
Yeah, he
My
was
condolences.
he was diagnosed with glioblastoma in June of 2022, and glioblastoma is an incurable brain cancer, and he passed away just in January. The time that we had together, especially on the bicycle, we say that we experienced something we call tandem time. And tandem time is that 3-month journey was like 20 years of marriage.
Wow.
Because we learned about one another. We had to work together every day, all day. And not just on the bicycle, but putting up the tent and getting our meals made and figuring out where we're going to go next. And everything had to be done together. And there are a lot of people who call the tandem bicycle a divorce machine because you get on it and you could just squabble all the time. And yet he and I found it as a way of coming closer and closer and closer to one another and figuring one another out. He always said that he wanted to see me be the very best I could be and to see me fly as high as I could fly. And I loved that about him, that he was willing to stand right there with me and let me go at the same time. And it was a fabulous relationship.
Ladies, that sounds like the mark of a good man. So you obviously got a reward in that relationship. And just then I'll ask you then during this, and I know some of the territory that you would have cycled over. And yes, some of it would have been very flat and very dry. And like those Montana areas, you mentioned Missoula.
Yeah, eastern Montana is not, I don't like it. Like, if I don't see eastern Montana again, it's not going to bother me any.
I could totally relate. Yes, I get that. And Montana is one of my favorite states, for sure. Just the topography. Same with Washington. I can't get enough of Washington State. But being able to ride your bicycle and be so close to the road and so close to the ditch and the line and passing vehicles. Thankfully, you weren't on the interstate. But that... there must have been some unexpected challenges that came up. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we have a lot of things that, you think you know what you're getting into.
Yeah.
That's one thing I'll say about an adventure is you believe you know what you're getting into, but if you really knew, you probably wouldn't go on the adventure at all because things crop up.
Yes.
We had unexpected road construction. One of the times there was 10 miles of road that had been completely dug out. It was down to the dirt. They had a truck that was spraying water, and then the cars were following it to keep the dust down. Well, there's no way we could ride across something like that. We ended up having to find someone who ferried us across in a truck, which was great that they were able to help us that way. I mean, we had flat tires. We had a mechanical issue on our bicycle where we were at a bike shop. They told us what part we needed. We had it shipped to the next bike shop. And then we limped along until we got there. We made do until we got there. We got on a bridge by mistake. that we were supposed to be on the pedestrian bridge, and we were out on the main bridge, and it was huge, and it was 6 lanes of 65-mile-an-hour traffic. And yeah, we were over in the breakdown lane, but it very uncomfortable. And the cars are flying by and they're beeping and they're, giving us the finger because we shouldn't be out there. And yeah, so we had a lot of things. We had weather. There was a point where we realized we had to hurry and get where we were going because there was this huge storm coming, and they were talking about 65-mile-an-hour straight line winds, and you can't be on a bicycle in that, and we got hailed on one time. And there's the idea of sleeping in tents in places where sometimes you wonder if it's even safe to be there. And there you are. And the only thing between you and anything bad is, a tent flap. So yeah, there was a lot of crazy things out there.
Yes. And I can imagine you were talking about if you never see Eastern Montana again, it'll be too soon. I can relate to that. One of the times my wife and I were driving across, granted we were on the interstate, but when you're going through those very dry, and this is a total metaphor for life, when you're driving through those very dry areas and then you see a body of water, or you're going, like for us, it was probably going across the Mississippi after all that flat land. Can you describe some of those vistas that would have taken your breath away?
Well, when we were in Lolo Pass, so this is an area that goes up through Idaho, and then you kind of cross up and over and into Montana. That's how we got over the Rockies. My husband is the most wonderful man. He let me stop. I have over 400 pictures from those 3 days.
Wow.
Because we would turn a corner and I would say, oh my gosh, that's the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. And he would pull over and let me take a picture, and then take a picture and take a picture. So that whole time. But we had a couple of things happen that were amazing. One of them was it was a hard day. I believe we were still in Montana. I feel like we were in Montana a long time. And it was a difficult day. We were going up a hill. I was very tired, very hot. And I was no longer really looking around me. I was just looking like down at my knees. And I was just almost counting, just up and down, up and down. And my husband said, Teri, look. And I looked off to my right, and there were horses, and they had started to run with us.
Really?
And the stallion at the front was running, and all of the horses behind him. And he got to the end of his territory. There was a fence, and he stopped and he pawed the ground and he shook his mane at us. And I thought, we could never have paid to have that happen.
No.
Never have paid. And there was another night in Montana. He got up in the middle of the night and woke me and said, you've got to come out here. And I thought, why do I want to come out? That's cold. I'm tired. But anyway, I opened up the tent flap and got out, and the stars were so close. And I've never seen the Milky Way look like that because I'm from the East Coast and we often have light pollution. And I felt like you could just reach up and swoosh it out of the sky. And then over to the left, right almost out of view, like it was just going over, was a comet called Neowise. That was in the sky at that point. And it was huge. I mean, it was just amazing. So yeah, we saw things over and over and over. Fields of sunflowers. Beautiful to see that.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. I know one of the things my wife and I like to do in the summers here is we have 2 lounge chairs. We'll put them out in the backyard. We live in a small town, so we don't have a lot of light pollution. And the amount of shooting stars and wobbly comets and other things like that if we just take the time to be out in creation, a gift that was given to us.
Absolutely.
And I will say, when we were driving back from visiting family years ago, driving through Montana to get back to the Pacific Northwest where there was trees, the question was, how long does this state of Montana go?
Years is how long it felt like. It was like, are we still in Montana? Mm-hmm. How many more days are we going to be in Montana? And you figure we averaged 43 miles a day.
That's good.
43 miles a day, and you figure out how wide Montana is. That's a lot of days in Montana.
Yeah. Absolutely. It is. It can be picturesque in certain areas.
Yes, it is beautiful. There are some places that are beautiful, and we had some really beautiful things happen. And it was also it got boring after a while. It's the same sights. There's not a lot of difference. It's like that small hill over there looks like the one we just passed back here.
Yes.
And there aren't a lot of trees. And so you go through and it's like, oh, look, there's the 5th tree for the day.
Yeah.
And it just felt very different than what we were used to at home.
Yeah. So I want to ask you a little bit more because I love maps and topography and cycling, and we will get to your books, definitely. I got to keep an eye on the clock so we don't run out of time. Now, we can talk all about this spot, and you hit the big river. I think it's the Assiniboia River that you go over, and then you get into like completely different topography. And what was that reaction of going, I don't know if you got to see like the Wisconsin Dells, probably not, but getting into the UP of Michigan.
That's a beautiful place.
Yes.
Isn't that? And very different.
Very.
Very different. And so you're there, and right before you get into UP Michigan too, there are people who talk about Bigfoot. It becomes a thing.
It's
well,
true.
Bigfoot can't exist in eastern Montana. There are no trees to hide in.
He can't hide.
Right?
Yeah.
There's no hiding spots.
No shots for blurry pictures.
Right. One of the places that surprised me the most, though, was when we were in Oregon and we're going over the mountains, and there was moss on all sides of the tree. You know, there's that saying that moss grows on the north side. It was like, no, the moss here is growing on all branches, all sides. But when we finally made it over all of that mountain range, it was like a desert. So now you're in the other half of Oregon, which is dry and dusty and so different. And I didn't know that that existed in Oregon. In my mind, being from the East Coast,
right?
Oregon is wet. Washington is wet. There's nothing else to it. It's wet and wet. And it's not true. It depends, like, where are you in relation to the mountain ranges?
Yes, that's right. And those lee sides of the mountains. Where those rain clouds, there's so many metaphors for life. They have to lighten their load to get up over the mountain.
Yeah.
And such truer words have not been spoken. What about, I'm going to ask you before we get into your books, and we could talk more about this if you want, but what was your thought about going over the Mackinac Straits?
Well, that was beautiful.
Yeah.
That was beautiful. But when we were going, it was COVID. So we went in summer of 2020.
Gotcha.
There were a lot of restrictions out, and we were not allowed to cross over the bridge. So we had to be ferried over like on a, and then they wouldn't let us ride it, but they no longer offered the service to take us across. So we had to find someone willing to take us across.
Wow.
Which was crazy because, once again, it's COVID.
Yeah.
And so we're relying on strangers who we never had a problem. It's amazing to me how often people were willing to help. But the fact that they were willing to help, and it was the summer of 2020.
Yes.
Just shows that people are a lot more resilient than we give them credit for, and they're a lot kinder.
And they're a lot kinder. And
there are a lot of crazy people out there. Don't get me wrong. I don't doubt that. But I just believe that in general, people are good and kind and want to be helpful. And can you find people who aren't that way? Well, of course you can. But I think more often than not, you're going to find those that are good.
Yes. Where did your trip terminate?
So we stopped in Washington, D.C., and we stopped at the Marine Corps Memorial. We did that for two reasons. One, my husband is a 25-year vet. And the other reason is we raised money for Toys for Tots. And so it just seemed like the perfect place to stop.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. That's great. So have you written the book? Is it in process, or is it done now?
The book is out.
Okay.
But the book is now out. It's not really a travel log. If someone is wanting to know my ins and outs of every day, I kept a blog. And you can go to my website and you can find the blog and you can read every single day. You can find out what the temperature was, how many miles we rode. You can do the whole thing. This is more like a compilation of things I learned about myself and life and other people while riding across the United States. And then I take things that we did while on the trip and I illustrate with those. So it's not a from Oregon to Washington, D.C. travel log. Wow. It's more of a what did I learn? And how am I going to use that in my life from this point forward?
Well, that's exciting. So without giving away too much, I got to ask you, what was the most valuable lesson you learned?
I have two that really mean a lot to me. And
Okay.
I'll tell you the first one
Okay.
is never quit on a bad day. And there was a day that was bad. It was bad. We had to go 70 miles. There was no alternative. There was nothing in between. It was 90 degrees. We had a flat tire, not once, not twice, but 3 times. We were in a valley at one point that the mosquitoes were about the size of my fist. I've never seen anything like them. And they just would swarm at you, and you're having to it was horrible. And by the end of that day, I was done and I did not want to ride anymore. That was it. We're done. And we had made it over the Rockies. We were still in Montana. We were about halfway through Montana at that point. And I was done. And I put that in my blog because I was very honest in my blog. I told people exactly how I was feeling. I had a friend reach out and they said, what you've done is amazing. And if you quit today, you could hold your head up high, because how many people do you know have ridden that far on a tandem bicycle over the Rocky Mountains?
Yeah.
However,
Exactly.
don't quit on a bad day. You will always wonder if you could have made it. Instead, take a couple of days, rest, relax, find something fun to do, make it easy on yourself, and then think about it logically. And if you still want to quit, then you can quit with a clear conscience and you have no problems. If you quit today, you'll always wonder. And of course, we didn't quit. We ended up having a wonderful day the next day where, the winds were with us, and we made it to the next place. We made it 44 miles in 2.5 hours. It was unbelievable. And we didn't want to quit then. And I've used that over and over in my life. When you hit something hard emotionally, you want to just, I'm done. But are you really, or are you just tired? Are you just hungry? Do you just need a break to do something else? And often when you come back to it, you say, okay, I can do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of liberty. We have such a comfortable lifestyle around us. But when we find one of those really bad days that knocks us around and makes us feel like we have to quit, then we take a little bit of a break and we get back up, and it's the next day or the next day after. And you think, that
I can do this.
circumstance did not beat me.
Yeah.
I had a win.
It was
a hard-fought win, but I had a win. Dagnabbit. So I want to ask you about interesting characters. You talked about some nice people. How about some, Hank Hill in the flesh, or some interesting characters that you met along the way?
So you're going to think all we did was ride in Montana.
Okay.
But there was another man in Montana. We were riding in the morning. We would get up early. As soon as the sun was up. In fact, sometimes we were up before the sun, and as soon as the sun was up, we started riding. It was like, get out there. So we stopped at this. It was a bar, but it was open at 10 in the morning, and they did serve breakfast as well. So I don't really know, but they called themselves a saloon, and they had tables outside because once again, it was COVID.
Yeah.
And so we stopped and got a soda, and we're sitting there, and this man walks over and he starts to talk to us. And the first thing that he did was he was telling us he had a lot of conspiracy theories, and he was letting them all out. And then the next thing you know, he leans in real close and he looks over the table and he said, "I've seen Bigfoot." And you're like,
thanks for burying the headline. Why didn't you start with that?
Yeah, like, wow. And so he describes this time that he and his buddies were in the woods, and he firmly believes. And I looked over at my husband and I kind of, did like this, and I took my helmet and put it on my head, and he took his helmet and put it on his head. And we said, well, it's been so nice talking to you.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if he was definitely drinking. I can't tell if he had been drinking from the night before and had just continued on, or if he had already started at 10 a.m. I'm not positive, but he was a firm believer that, yes, indeed. There was another time where we were camping in a city park. We were allowed. That was something that was allowed. And the next thing you know, we were right up next to an Indian reservation, and 3 men started drumming on the table, singing in a language that I'm sure was an Indian language. I couldn't tell you which one. Yeah, you start to, and they were also drinking. And you start to wonder, like, are we going to be okay here?
Sure.
Yeah, babe.
That's a human emotion. Yes.
Yeah, they were very nice, though. They were absolutely nice. One of them came over and told us that the one guy was singing a song about our travels and telling us that we were going to have safe travels.
That's nice.
Which I thought was cool. But there were just a lot of times where you met people who have very strong beliefs about something.
Yeah.
And you're kind of like, wow, I didn't know. I mean, I know that there have been all of the legends about Bigfoot.
Of course.
I didn't know there were anyone that people actually believed it.
Yeah.
But the answer is yes, because we met more than one.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. So we'll take a divergent path
Okay.
to use a literary term that's been used. Somebody did that somewhere along the way, I think, took the road less traveled.
Less traveled, yes.
And so do you have a favorite of your novels?
Well, that's like asking me which child is my favorite.
I know, because there is an answer. Nobody ever wants to give it. I totally get it.
My first one I love because it's my first.
Okay.
Because I finally did it.
Yep.
It was something I had wanted to do and I finally did it. But the last one I wrote, Daughters of Green Mountain Gap, I believe is my best novel to date. And then my middle one has a lot of family history in it. So I love it too. I guess it depends, like, what are we talking about?
Sure.
I
get it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a huge fan of history.
Yeah.
And I noticed that you have the feisty deeds, historical fictions of daring women.
Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit about the characters in that book?
Okay, so that book is actually an anthology. There's 23 short stories, and I have one of the short stories. So it's made up of 23 historical fiction authors. They're all women, and they wrote about strong women characters.
Nice.
And so we have these 23 short stories. My other 3 novels are also historical fiction.
Okay.
And they're not connected, so they're very different. My first one is Sunflowers Beneath the Snow, and it is about 3 generations of Ukrainian women. Starts in the 1970s, goes through to 2014 when Russia invaded the first time. This book came out 4 weeks before the current Ukrainian crisis started.
Timely.
So it made me a little nervous.
Okay.
It's like, am I channeling something here? What's crazy about that is I have a Ukrainian friend who told me an incredible story. And it was so incredible that I wrote 82,000 words of fiction so I could tell those 3 pages of truth. So that's what that one is. The second one is a World War II genre, but different than a lot of World War II books. I look at a first-generation American. His family is German descent. He ends up fighting in World War II. He thinks he's going to fight the Japanese, and he ends up in Germany and realizes he's more like the enemy than he is different from the enemy. And we look at that story from his point of view, but also from his wife's, and then his 4-year-old son, both as a child and as an adult man looking back.
That sounds intense, but a good read. Sorry, go ahead.
And then my third one is called Daughters of Green Mountain Gap. It's 1890s North Carolina Appalachian Mountains, and it's a family of healers. The grandmother is what's called a granny woman. I say that's like roots and herbs and a little bit of mountain magic.
Right.
Her daughter decides that she also wants to be a healer, but decides to be a nurse. And she goes to Boston, becomes a nurse, and tries to bring modern medicine back to her community. And then the youngest looks at both of them and says, they both have such good things about them. And yet neither one of them is perfect because both my mother and my grandmother lose patients, So what is it that I'm going to choose? And that's kind of the conflict of old and new and that within the family as people change and how do you handle that?
Right. Wow, that's exciting. So how can our listeners and viewers connect with you and your books?
The best way is to go to my website, which is my name, Teri M Brown, and that's Teri with 1 R. There on my website are all my social media links. You can reach me there. I have a newsletter. All my books are available for sale. You can listen to my podcast, which is online for authors, where I interview other authors. And then I even just have a contact page if you just have a question and want to reach out to me. I always get back to people who reach out.
Wow, that's great. And you have a newsletter too, correct?
I do, yeah.
Yes. So, ladies and gentlemen, you can sign up at TeriMBrown.com for Teri's newsletter. And Teri, do you like puns, play on words?
My
Like
husband
saying,
was a master of them. I wish I could
oh,
do it the way he did it.
wow. A good day is filled with puns. Well, at least one. You got to have a pun somewhere along the way. Well, unfortunately, this is where we have to like take divergent paths again. So thank you so much, Teri. It was a pleasure to have you on the 5 a.m. podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Me too. It was a great conversation. We will have to do this again. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are wrapping up. I've already mentioned Teri's website and her newsletter and her books. You've got to get over there. I do believe there's, Teri, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but an exclusive list maybe of 10 historical fiction. Can you tell us just
Yes.
in that?
So if you sign up for the newsletter, you get a list of 10 historical fiction you've never heard of, but are
Awesome.
sure to bring you to tears.
Wonderful. Those are great. Oh, we actually had, I would call him a friend. Now that we've known each other for a little bit, his name is Jared Knott, and he's got 2 books out, the Tiny Blunders, Big Disasters, book 1 and 2. It's, ladies and gentlemen, looking back and learning from the past is such a valuable key for us. So thank you,
Absolutely.
Teri. It
Thank
has
you.
been wonderful to have you on. And to our listeners, thank you so much. Friends, please share this with your friends and with people that might be thinking about riding their bicycle somewhere. Somebody that might need either a kick in the pants or a hand up. Definitely share this with them, because this is a great conversation just to share some love around. And after you're done doing that, feel free to head over to Buy Me a Coffee /5am podcast. You can always leave a couple of virtual bills, dollar bills, coins, whatever, in the coffee cup if you feel so inclined. And if you're really enamored with 5am podcast, you can find some place to review the show, like a podcast player, and leave us with a 5-star review. They do tell us that it's 5 or nothing, friends. So if you're leaning towards the 0, apparently that lean starts at 4. So if you could click 5 stars, we would love that. And remember that great stories are meant to be shared, just like your morning coffee. Thanks for being with us today. I'm Michael Clausen, and we appreciate you being here at 5am Podcast.